The forest was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. It was the kind of quiet that seemed to press against your eardrums, a silence so thick it swallowed every rustle, every distant hoot, every breath of wind. Even the crunch of our boots on the pine-blanketed ground felt muffled, like the forest didn't want us there. We'd been hiking for nearly 3 hours off the marked trail when we finally found the perfect spot to set up camp, a narrow clearing surrounded by towering pines that reached high enough to blot out most of the late afternoon sunlight. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, like rain had fallen here days ago but never quite dried. I remember thinking it felt like stepping into a place no one had touched for decades, maybe centuries. "Man, this is perfect," said Evan, tossing his backpack onto the ground with a thud. He was the one who had pushed for this trip in the first place. 4 friends, 1 long weekend, no cell service, no people, just nature. He was grinning ear to ear, stretching his arms out as if he owned the place. "Perfect for getting murdered," muttered Jenny, adjusting her beanie as she glanced around. She wasn't thrilled about being dragged into the deep woods, but she'd come along anyway, mostly for Evan. "Stop being so paranoid," Evan said with a smirk. "This is exactly what camping's supposed to be. No noise, no distractions." "Yeah, no rescue either," Jenny shot back, crossing her arms. I chuckled nervously, pretending I wasn't just as unsettled. I'd been feeling a strange pull ever since we left the beaten trail. Not a physical pull, more like a whisper in the back of my mind urging me to keep moving forward, deeper into the trees. "You guys are such buzzkills," laughed Rachel, our 4th and most adventurous member of the group. She dropped her bag next to Evan's and began unpacking the tent. "Come on, let's get this set up before it gets dark." The sky was already dimming, the sunlight bleeding into rusty orange hues. We pitched 2 tents side by side while the forest around us grew colder. The temperature seemed to drop unnaturally fast, our breath visible in thin wisps despite it being late summer. By the time we built a fire, the forest was in complete darkness. The fire crackled and popped, sparks spiraling upward only to vanish into the oppressive black canopy above. Sitting around that fire, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. Every time I glanced into the shadows between the trees, I thought I saw something, movement too quick to catch, a darker patch of black among black. "All right," Evan said, clapping his hands together as if to shake off the eerie vibe. "So, who brought the marshmallows?" Rachel snorted and reached for her bag. Jenny pulled her coat tighter, staring off into the darkness. "This place gives me the creeps," she murmured. "Relax," Evan said. "We're miles from anyone. That's the whole point." That was exactly what worried me. We roasted marshmallows and made awkward conversation, but the night refused to settle into that cozy camping atmosphere I'd imagined. The silence was too heavy, broken only by the crackling fire and the occasional pop of resin in the wood. No insects chirping. No owls hooting. Not even the whisper of wind through the branches. It was as though the forest itself was holding its breath. It was sometime after midnight when I first heard it. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or raccoon moving through the brush. But then I realized it wasn't coming from the ground. It was high up, somewhere in the trees. A slow, deliberate sound, like branches swaying under a weight that was too heavy for them. "Did you hear that?" I asked quietly. Rachel looked up from her phone flashlight. "Hear what?" A snap echoed through the clearing, sharp and sudden. All of us froze, staring into the darkness. "Probably just an owl," Evan said, though his voice wasn't convincing. Another snap, closer this time. Then silence. "I think it's coming from over there," Jenny whispered, pointing toward a thick wall of trees. We all stared, squinting into the void beyond the firelight. And that's when I saw it. 2 faint glimmers. Eyes. They were too far apart, too high off the ground. They weren't the warm glow of an animal's reflective eyes, either. They were pale, almost white, and they didn't blink. They just stared. "Holy crap," Rachel breathed. "What is that?" "Probably a deer," Evan muttered, though he sounded less sure this time. "Deer don't have eyes like that," I whispered. The eyes vanished. 1 second they were there, the next they were gone. Evan grabbed a flashlight and shined it into the trees. Nothing. Just darkness and branches swaying slightly, though there was no wind. "I don't like this," Jenny said, her voice trembling. "It's fine," Evan said, trying to sound in control. "It's probably an animal. Let's just get some sleep." No one argued, though none of us were particularly eager to climb into our flimsy nylon tents. Rachel and I shared one tent, while Evan and Jenny took the other. I lay there in the dark, every rustle of fabric and snap of a twig outside making my heart race. I don't know how long I'd been lying awake when I heard the footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, crunching softly over the pine needles just outside our tent. I froze, holding my breath, straining to listen. Then, a voice. "Cold night, isn't it?" It was a man's voice, deep and raspy, as though he hadn't spoken in years. Rachel stirred beside me. "What the hell?" she whispered. I pressed a finger to my lips. "Hello," the voice called again, closer this time. I dared a glance through the thin mesh window of our tent. A figure stood at the edge of the dying campfire's glow. He was tall, unnaturally tall, his head almost brushing the lowest branches of the trees. He wore ragged clothing that looked centuries old, tattered wool and leather, patched with what looked like animal hides. His skin was pale, almost gray, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. But it was his smile that froze me. It was too wide. Far too wide for a human face. "I'm lost," the figure said softly, his voice dripping with something I couldn't place. "Hunger, maybe. Could I join your fire?" Rachel's hand clamped over mine. Neither of us moved. The man, or whatever he was, stepped closer, his feet making no sound now despite the dry pine needles. The firelight flickered across his face, illuminating eyes that weren't really eyes at all, but empty sockets glowing faintly with a sickly white light. "You're awfully quiet," he said, cocking his head at an unnatural angle. "That's polite." I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to do something, but every muscle in my body was locked in place. The creature crouched near the fire, his long fingers curling around his knees like a spider poised to strike. "So warm," he murmured. "It's been so long since I've felt warm." A rustle came from the other tent. Evan was waking up. "Who's out there?" he called groggily. The creature's head snapped toward Evan's tent. In an instant, it was standing, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't as it turned toward him. "Shut up," I hissed under my breath, though it was too late. The creature's grin widened as it stepped toward Evan's tent. I acted without thinking, fumbling for the flashlight. I turned it on and shined it directly at the thing. For a split second, it froze. Its glowing eyes dimmed, and a low hiss escaped its mouth. Then, faster than I could blink, it was gone. Vanished into the trees. The forest was silent again. Evan stumbled out of his tent, flashlight in hand, looking around wildly. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But it wasn't human." Jenny was crying quietly, her face pale as a ghost. Rachel clutched my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. We huddled together by the fire until dawn, too afraid to go back into the tents. Every now and then, I thought I saw something watching us from the trees, but when I blinked, it was gone. When the first light of morning filtered through the trees, we packed up camp in silence. None of us spoke about what we'd seen. We just wanted to get out. But as we started back toward the trail, I noticed something carved into one of the trees near our campsite. A symbol. A circle with a jagged line cutting through it. Freshly carved. And below it, scratched deep into the bark, were the words, "Don't come back." We didn't speak for hours as we trudged through the forest, the sound of our boots crunching over fallen leaves the only thing breaking the uneasy silence. The trees seemed even taller in daylight, their trunks rising like prison bars around us, their dense canopy still blocking out much of the morning sun. It should have been comforting, walking under the light after such a night, but instead, it felt worse, as if something was following us, darting from shadow to shadow just out of sight. Evan was leading the way with a map clutched in his trembling hands, trying to retrace our steps back to the main trail. He wasn't his usual confident self. His cocky grin was gone, replaced by tight lips and a furrowed brow. Rachel stuck close behind me, her hand brushing my backpack every few steps like she was making sure I was still there. Jenny brought up the rear, pale and silent, her eyes constantly scanning the treetops. "Does anyone else feel like," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible, "like we're being herded?" I glanced back at her. What do you mean? She shuddered. Like, we're not lost. We're being led somewhere. Jenny made a choked sound. Don't say that. But she wasn't wrong. Something about the way the trees twisted around us felt intentional, almost architectural. We'd been walking for hours, yet the forest looked exactly the same. Towering pines, thick underbrush, a floor carpeted in dry needles. No landmarks, no familiar boulders or fallen logs. Just an endless maze. Evan stopped abruptly and turned to us, his expression grim. Okay. I think I messed up. What do you mean, messed up? Jenny snapped, her voice shaking. He unfolded the map, pointing to a scribbled line he'd drawn the day before. We should have been back at the main trail an hour ago. I've been trying to follow the compass, but... He trailed off, frowning. The needle keeps spinning. It's not working right. Rachel's eyes widened. That's not possible. I'm telling you, Evan said, holding out the compass. The needle spun lazily, twitching back and forth like it couldn't decide which way was north. A cold knot formed in my stomach. The forest wasn't just disorienting us, it was actively working against us. Jenny grabbed Evan's arm. We have to get out of here. I don't care which way, just pick a direction and go. We did. 4 hours, we stumbled through the dense woods, ducking under low branches and stepping over tangled roots. The sunlight shifted overhead, sliding from pale yellow to deep orange as the day wore on. We were exhausted, dehydrated, and terrified, but none of us dared stop for long. Every time we paused, the forest fell so silent that even our breathing felt too loud, like we might attract attention if we stayed still for too long. As evening fell, we stumbled into another clearing. It was smaller than our campsite, just a patch of grass surrounded by towering pines, but it was open enough to see the sky, darkening now, streaked with purple and red. We can't keep going in the dark, Evan said finally, collapsing onto a log. He ran his hands through his hair, his face pale with exhaustion. We'll just get more lost. I don't want to stay out here another night, Jenny said, her voice cracking. We can't. Rachel knelt beside her, rubbing her back. We don't have a choice. We're out of daylight. We'll keep the fire going all night, okay? Nothing's going to happen. But we all knew she was lying. We built a small fire from what little dry wood we could find. The flames flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the clearing. I sat with my back against a tree, staring into the darkness between the trunks, convinced I could see movement. Sometime around midnight, I heard it again. The voice. Cold night, isn't it? It was soft, almost playful, and it came from the darkness beyond the firelight. Rachel jerked upright, her eyes wide. Did you hear that? Sure. I hissed. Jenny whimpered, clutching her knees to her chest. Evan grabbed a stick from the fire, brandishing it like a weapon. Who's there? He called out, his voice shaking. A low chuckle drifted through the clearing, echoing off the trees. I told you not to come back, the voice said. Rachel's breath hitched. We didn't. We're trying to leave. The laughter came again, closer this time. You're already mine. You just don't know it yet. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was the same creature from the night before, its glowing white eyes fixed on us, that impossible grin stretching across its pale face. It moved slowly, deliberately, its long limbs bending unnaturally as it circled the edge of the clearing. What do you want from us? I shouted, though my voice cracked. The creature tilted its head, amused. Want? I don't want. I take. It darted forward faster than I could react, its body blurring as it lunged toward Jenny. She screamed as Evan swung the burning stick at it. The creature recoiled, hissing, its skin smoking where the flames touched. Stay back! Evan yelled, swinging the torch wildly. The thing snarled, retreating into the shadows with a speed that defied logic. Silence fell. Is it gone? Rachel whispered. I shook my head, my eyes scanning the tree-line. No. It's playing with us. We huddled close to the fire, clutching sticks and flashlights, every muscle in our bodies tense. Hours passed in terrified silence. Every so often, I'd see a pair of glowing eyes watching us from the darkness, only to blink out when I turned the flashlight toward them. When dawn finally came, the creature vanished again, as if the sunlight had chased it away. But we weren't relieved. We were terrified, exhausted, and more lost than ever. "We can't just wander aimlessly," Rachel said as we packed up camp. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "We need a plan." Evan knelt down, pulling something from the dirt. "Guys, look." We gathered around him. In the mud at the edge of the clearing was a single footprint. It wasn't human. The print was enormous, long and thin, with claw-like toes that dug deep into the soil. Jenny covered her mouth, stifling a sob. "What is that thing?" Evan stood up, his jaw tight. "I don't know. But I'm not sticking around to find out." We chose a direction and started walking, though none of us really believed we'd find our way out. The forest felt alive now, like it was watching us, shifting around us. The trees leaned closer together, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. At one point, I thought I saw something carved into a tree trunk ahead. I walked closer, heart pounding. It was another symbol, the same circle with a jagged line through it we'd seen back at the campsite. Only this time, there were dozens of them. Every tree in a 20-foot radius was marked. "This isn't random," I whispered. Something marked this place." Rachel shivered. "It's like a warning." "No," Evan said, his voice grim. "It's a boundary." The air felt heavier as we moved through the grove of marked trees, like stepping into another world. The forest floor was littered with bones, small ones at first, like rabbits or birds, but the deeper we went, the larger they became. A deer skull. A bear skeleton, half buried in the dirt. And then we found the cabin. It was barely standing, a rotting wooden structure leaning against a massive pine. The roof sagged inward, and the door hung crooked on rusted hinges. Vines crept up the walls, and the windows were shattered, leaving dark, gaping holes. "Maybe there's a map or a phone," Evan said, though his voice was shaky. Jenny shook her head violently. "No. No way. That thing wants us to go in there." But we were desperate. We stepped inside. The air was thick with the stench of rot. Dust motes swirled in the dim light streaming through the broken windows. Animal pelts hung from the walls, brittle and moth-eaten. In the center of the room was a table covered in strange objects. Jars of murky liquid, bundles of herbs, bones arranged in intricate patterns. On the far wall, a crude altar had been built from stones and sticks, and above it hung dozens of small wooden carvings shaped like twisted human figures. "This is," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "A shrine. To what?" Evan asked, though none of us had an answer. Then we heard it again. That voice, whispering from somewhere inside the cabin. "You shouldn't have come here." We spun around, but the room was empty. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. Rachel screamed. Jenny clutched my arm, sobbing. Evan fumbled with his flashlight, finally getting it on, just in time to see something crawling across the ceiling toward us. Its pale limbs bent backward, its face twisted into that impossible grin, those glowing eyes fixed on us like a predator sizing up prey. The creature dropped from the ceiling, landing in front of the altar with a sickening thud. It stood tall, towering over us, its grin widening. "You belong to me now," it hissed. The creature's grin stretched impossibly wide, its empty white sockets glowing brighter in the flickering beam of Evan's flashlight. It moved with a jerky, unnatural rhythm, its limbs bending at wrong angles as it took a step closer. The wooden carvings hanging above the altar clattered softly, as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. "Run!" Evan yelled, hurling the flashlight at the creature's face. It struck with a dull thud, and the beam spun wildly across the walls, briefly illuminating its gray, stretched skin. The distraction lasted only a second, but it was enough for us to bolt toward the door. Rachel grabbed the rusty handle, yanking it open with a loud screech of metal, and we spilled out into the fading daylight. The creature shrieked behind us, a high, inhuman wail that sent shivers down my spine. We didn't stop to look back. We ran, branches slapping against our faces, pine needles crunching underfoot, until our lungs burned and our legs trembled. When we finally stopped, gasping for air, the forest was silent again. The only sound was the frantic thump of my heart. Jenny collapsed against a tree, her face pale and streaked with tears. "We're going to die out here," she whispered. "No, we're not," Evan said, though his voice trembled. "We just need to figure out what it is. Maybe we can kill it." Rachel stared at him in disbelief. "Kill it? Did you see that thing? It's not even human." "Exactly," Evan snapped. "If it bleeds, it can die." I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. "I don't think this is something you kill. I think this is something you escape from. If that's even possible." Jenny hugged herself, rocking back and forth. "It said we belong to it. We can't get out." Her words sent a chill through me because deep down, I wondered if she was right. The forest didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a trap. We decided to keep moving. Staying in one place felt like inviting it to find us. But every direction looked the same. The trees twisted overhead like an endless cage, and the fading light only made it worse. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, it was impossible to tell. My sense of time had completely unraveled. The forest seemed to change around us, subtly rearranging itself when we weren't looking. The air grew colder, heavier, and I swore I heard whispers in the wind. Then we found the stone circle. It appeared out of nowhere, 12 massive stones, each taller than a person, arranged in a perfect ring. The ground inside was bare, no grass or pine needles, just smooth, dark soil. Strange symbols had been carved into each stone, the same jagged circle and line symbol we'd seen before, but these were older, worn almost smooth with age. Rachel stepped forward cautiously. "This looks ancient." Jenny grabbed her arm. "Don't go in there." But Rachel was already inside the circle, kneeling to trace one of the carvings with her fingers. "This feels different. Like maybe it's not evil. Maybe it's a safe place." I stepped closer, and immediately felt it too, a subtle shift in the air, like stepping out of a suffocating room into fresh air. The oppressive weight of the forest seemed to lessen inside the ring. Evan joined us, scanning the symbols. "This looks like some kind of protection. Maybe we can stay here for the night." Jenny hesitated at the edge of the circle, trembling. "What if it's a trap? What if it's not?" I countered. "We can't keep running forever." After a long moment, she stepped inside. The difference was immediate. The forest outside the circle seemed darker, more distant, like a shadowy wall had been drawn between us and whatever was lurking out there. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. We built a small fire in the center of the circle. The stones glowed faintly in the firelight, casting strange, elongated shadows. For a while, none of us spoke, just sat in exhausted silence, trying to process everything. Then, a sound broke the stillness. A soft, angry hiss from beyond the circle. I looked up, and there it was. The creature. It stood at the edge of the circle, its glowing eyes fixed on us, its grin wider than ever. But it didn't step forward. It paced around the stones, hissing and snarling like a wild animal. "It can't come in," Rachel whispered, awe in her voice. The creature slammed a clawed hand against one of the stones, and the symbol glowed faintly, repelling it like an invisible barrier. It shrieked in frustration, a horrible piercing sound that made my ears ring. Jenny covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. "Make it stop." "Stay calm," Evan said, though he looked terrified. "It can't touch us." 4 hours, the creature circled the stone ring, testing the barrier, slamming against it, hissing and growling. But it never stepped inside. Finally, just before dawn, it vanished into the shadows. We didn't sleep. We just sat there, too afraid to close our eyes, waiting for the sun to rise. When daylight came, the forest seemed calmer. Birds even chirped faintly in the distance, the first sign of normal life we'd seen since arriving. But none of us believed we were safe. "We need to find a way out," Evan said, his voice hoarse. "That thing won't give up. This circle, it's temporary. It's not a solution." Rachel nodded reluctantly. "Maybe the cabin has something, a clue, a map, something that explains what's happening." Jenny shook her head violently. "No. I'm not going back there." "Do you have a better idea?" Evan asked. She didn't. After a tense argument, we agreed to return to the cabin, but this time, we'd be prepared. We fashioned makeshift torches from sticks and rags soaked in lighter fluid, and we carried rocks from the circle, hoping they might hold some of the protective magic. The walk back was tense, every snapping twig making us spin around. But when we reached the cabin, the forest was silent again, almost too still. The door was wide open now, swaying slightly in the breeze. "Something's not right," I whispered. We stepped inside cautiously. The altar was still there, but the wooden carvings were gone. The jars and bones had been scattered across the floor, and the air smelled of rot and smoke. Rachel knelt by the altar, examining the stones. "These symbols, they're like the ones in the circle." "Maybe whoever lived here was protecting themselves from that thing," Evan said. "Maybe they trapped it." I frowned. "Then how did it get out?" A sudden thud upstairs made us all freeze. "Someone's up there," Rachel whispered. Evan motioned for us to stay quiet as he crept up the creaking staircase. I followed close behind, gripping my torch tightly. The upstairs hallway was narrow and dark, lined with broken picture frames and peeling wallpaper. At the end of the hall was a single door, slightly ajar. Evan pushed it open. Inside was a small bedroom, the bed covered in a thick layer of dust. But what caught my eye was the writing on the walls. Symbols. Hundreds of them, carved into the wood, painted in dried, rust-colored streaks. The circle with a jagged line, over and over again, surrounding a single phrase scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Don't look into its eyes." I barely had time to process the warning before a loud creak echoed behind us. We spun around. The creature was crawling along the ceiling, its limbs splayed out like a spider, its face inches from Evan's. It hissed, and Evan swung his torch instinctively, flames licking its gray skin. The creature shrieked and recoiled, but this time it didn't vanish. It lunged at us, moving so fast I barely had time to react. We stumbled backward, crashing down the stairs in a heap. Jenny screamed as the creature leapt from the ceiling, landing on the floor in front of us with a sickening crack. It moved toward Rachel, its clawed hand outstretched. She grabbed one of the stones from the circle and held it out. The creature stopped. It hissed, recoiling from the glowing symbol etched into the stone. Rachel thrust it forward, and the creature let out a guttural roar before retreating toward the shadows. "Go!" Evan shouted, grabbing Jenny by the arm. "Run!" We bolted from the cabin, sprinting into the forest with the creature's shrieks echoing behind us. We didn't stop until we collapsed near a stream, gasping for air. Rachel clutched the glowing stone to her chest, trembling. "It's afraid of these symbols. They're like a weapon." Evan nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Then we need more of them." I looked around at the endless forest, at the shadows that seemed to move on their own. "We don't need weapons," I said quietly. "We need a way out." But deep down, I was starting to fear there wasn't one. We stayed by the stream for hours, trying to regain our breath, trying to convince ourselves we weren't being hunted right that very second. The water trickled softly over smooth stones, a strangely peaceful sound in a place that felt like hell. We took turns drinking from it, filling our bottles, scrubbing dirt and dried blood from our hands and faces. But even in that moment of brief relief, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was breathing with us, watching, listening, waiting. Rachel crouched by the water, still clutching the glowing stone she'd used to drive the creature away. Its faint, pulsating light reflected in her wide eyes. "I think these stones are why the creature can't come into that circle," she murmured, half to herself. "It's sacred, or something. These symbols, they're not random. Someone carved them for protection." Jenny sat on a nearby log, her knees pulled tight to her chest. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled. "Sacred or not, it's not enough. That thing followed us right into the cabin. It's not scared of us. It's playing with us." "Not anymore," Evan said firmly. He was sharpening a long branch into a makeshift spear with his pocket-knife, the blade trembling slightly in his hands. "We're not just going to run anymore. We're going to fight back." Jenny gave a humorless laugh. "Fight back? Against what? You don't even know what it is." "That's exactly why we're losing," Evan snapped. "We don't know what it is, but it knows everything about us. It knows how to hunt us. We're like prey." "Then maybe we stop being prey," Rachel said. She turned the glowing stone over in her hands, studying the carving. "If these markings are protective, maybe we can make more." Create something like that stone circle but portable. Armor ourselves against it. I rubbed my temples, exhausted. And how do we do that? We don't know how these were made. For all we know, they were carved by some ancient cult 100 years ago. Rachel looked up at me with a strange intensity. Then we find out. She was right. Running blindly through this forest hadn't worked. We needed answers. And I knew exactly where to find them. The cabin, I said reluctantly. Evan groaned. You want to go back there again? That place wasn't just a shrine, I said. It was a warning, or maybe a prison. Whoever lived there, they knew about this thing. Maybe they left clues. Maybe there's a way to stop it. Jenny shook her head violently. No. No way. I'm not going back. We barely escaped with our lives last time. Jenny, Rachel said gently, if we don't figure out what this thing is, we're going to die out here. All of us. Jenny looked like she might argue, but instead she buried her face in her hands and sobbed quietly. We decided to wait until nightfall to move. The idea was insane, venturing back into that cursed cabin in the dark, but it made sense. The creature hunted at night, and if we wanted to catch it off guard, we needed to search while it was stalking us elsewhere. We made crude torches from branches and strips of Rachel's spare shirt, soaking them in lighter fluid. We also carved makeshift copies of the symbols onto sticks, rocks, anything we could carry. Rachel's glowing stone seemed to hum in her hand as we worked, like it was alive, guiding us. When the sun dipped below the horizon, we set off. The forest was quiet again, but this time it felt worse, like the calm before a storm. Every tree seemed to lean closer, every shadow stretched unnaturally long. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slithering through the darkness, circling us just out of sight. When the cabin finally came into view, it looked even worse than before. The door still hung open, but now it swung lazily in the wind, creaking softly like a metronome. The walls sagged inward, and the carvings on the outside seemed to shimmer faintly in the torchlight, almost as if they were alive. We crept inside cautiously, our torches flickering. The stench of decay was overpowering now, thick and cloying, making it hard to breathe. The altar at the back of the room was untouched, but the bones scattered across the floor looked rearranged, like something had moved them. Rachel went straight to the altar, running her fingers over the symbols carved into the stones. These are the same as the ones in the circle, she murmured. But some of them are different. Look. She pointed to a carving that looked like an eye with a line through it. I remembered the warning upstairs, don't look into its eyes. Evan scanned the room with his torch. We need to check upstairs again. There might be more. Jenny grabbed his arm. Please. Don't go back up there. Please. But we had to. Evan and I led the way, Rachel close behind, clutching the glowing stone like a talisman. The hallway was even darker than before, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse faintly in the torchlight. The bedroom door was still ajar. We stepped inside, our torches casting flickering light over the walls covered in carvings. I noticed something I hadn't before, a large, crude drawing on the far wall. It depicted a tall, thin creature with hollow eyes and elongated limbs, surrounded by circles like the one we'd seen in the clearing. Above it, written in the same shaky handwriting, were 2 words. The Hollow One. Rachel traced the words with her fingers. It's not just a spirit. It's older. Something ancient. Evan frowned. A name doesn't help us kill it. Maybe it does, Rachel said. Names have power. If this thing is tied to this forest, maybe there's a way to bind it again. Bind it? I asked. Whoever lived here wasn't just protecting themselves, Rachel said. They were holding it back. Something went wrong, but maybe we can fix it. Before I could respond, a loud creak echoed from the hallway. We froze. The sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, approached the door. Evan raised his torch, his makeshift spear trembling in his other hand. The door creaked wider, and then we saw it. The Hollow One crawled into the room, its limbs twisting unnaturally, its glowing eyes burning like twin lanterns. It hissed, and the symbols on the walls flared faintly, as if reacting to its presence. Rachel held up the glowing stone, and the creature recoiled with a guttural snarl. Back! She shouted. Stay back! The hollow one shrieked, lunging forward. We scattered as it swiped its clawed hand at Rachel, missing her by inches. Evan jabbed his spear at its chest, but the tip barely scratched its skin. Go! I shouted, grabbing Rachel's arm. We bolted for the stairs, the creature's shrieks echoing behind us. We reached the main floor and sprinted for the door, but the hollow one was faster. It dropped from the ceiling, landing in front of the entrance with a sickening crack. Its grin widened, and it hissed, blocking our only escape. Rachel clutched the glowing stone tighter, its light intensifying. The creature snarled, shielding its face from the glow. Keep it back! Evan yelled. Rachel stepped forward, holding the stone high. The creature retreated a step, hissing and clawing at the air. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, reacting to the confrontation. Suddenly, the cabin itself began to tremble. Dust rained from the rafters, and the carvings pulsed with an eerie white light. The hollow one let out a furious shriek and leapt backward, crashing through a window in a shower of glass. We didn't wait to see where it went. We ran. Outside, the forest was alive with sound again, branches snapping, leaves rustling, whispers swirling in the wind. The hollow one was everywhere and nowhere at once, darting through the trees like a shadow. Rachel clutched the glowing stone, her face pale but determined. We have to get back to the circle, she gasped. It's the only safe place. We sprinted through the woods, the creature shrieking behind us. Its glowing eyes flickered in the darkness, always too close, always just out of reach. When we finally stumbled into the stone circle, the hollow one slammed into an invisible barrier, its claws sparking against the glowing symbols. It let out a howl of rage that shook the ground beneath our feet. Rachel collapsed to her knees, clutching the stone. We can trap it, she whispered, her voice trembling. But we'll need more stones. More symbols. We need to complete the circle. Evan knelt beside her. What do you mean, complete it? It's already here. No, Rachel said, her eyes wide. This is a doorway. Someone made this to hold it here, to keep it bound. We're standing in its prison. But the prison's breaking. That's why it's free. I felt a chill run through me. And if it breaks completely... Rachel looked up at me, her face pale. It won't just hunt us. It'll hunt everything. The hollow one shrieked again, slamming its claws against the invisible barrier. The stones trembled, their light flickering. We don't have much time, Rachel said. We need to finish what they started. The hollow one circled the edge of the stone ring, its glowing eyes burning like lanterns in the darkness. It slammed its claws against the invisible barrier again, and this time the stones cracked faintly beneath our feet. The sound sent ice through my veins. Rachel was already on her knees, tracing the carvings in the dirt between the stones. Her fingers moved frantically, copying the symbols she'd memorized from the cabin walls. The glowing stone pulsed in her other hand like a beating heart. This isn't a safe zone anymore, she whispered, her voice shaking. The prison's breaking faster than I thought. Evan was pacing at the edge of the circle, clutching his spear. So how do we fix it? Just tell me what to do. Rachel's head snapped up. We need more stones. The original circle was bigger. We're standing in what's left of it. The hollow one's been tearing it apart for years. Jenny let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like a sob. You want us to go out there and collect rocks while that thing is circling us? If we don't, this circle will fail completely, Rachel said. And then we're dead. All of us. The hollow one let out a screech that made my teeth ache. It darted between the trees, moving so fast it was just a smear of shadow and light. It was testing the barrier, looking for weaknesses. I took a shaky breath and grabbed Jenny's hand. We're splitting up. Evan, you and I will grab stones. Rachel, you stay here and keep the circle stable. Jenny, you help her. I'm not. Jenny started. Jenny. I looked her in the eye. Please. Trust me. Her lip trembled, but she nodded. We stepped over the barrier carefully. The hollow one immediately froze in the trees, its glowing eyes swiveling toward us. Evan tightened his grip on his spear, and I raised my torch higher, praying the light would keep it back. It didn't charge us, not yet. It just stalked us from a distance, moving silently through the forest. I could hear its breath, wet and ragged, like wind rushing through hollow pipes. We grabbed the biggest stones we could find, working quickly, but every time we bent down to pick one up, the hollow one edged closer. I could see its teeth now, too many of them, gleaming faintly in the darkness. "Go, go, go," Evan muttered, and we jogged back toward the circle, arms full of rocks. The hollow one darted forward, so fast I barely saw it move. Evan swung his spear wildly, and the creature hissed, slashing at the air but stopping just short of his face. We dove back into the circle, nearly tripping over Rachel as she carved symbols into the dirt. The hollow one slammed into the barrier again, this time hard enough to make it flicker. The light of Rachel's stone pulsed frantically, as if warning us. "Keep going," Rachel shouted. "We need at least 4 more stones." Evan swore under his breath, dropping the rocks and sprinting back out with me close behind. My torch was burning low, the flames shrinking. I could feel the creature's gaze on my back like a physical weight. We found more stones, but this time, the hollow one didn't stay back. It lunged at Evan from the shadows, and he barely managed to block with his spear. The impact sent him sprawling, and I screamed, swinging my torch wildly. The flames caught its arm, and the hollow one shrieked, vanishing into the trees. Evan scrambled to his feet, bleeding from a long gash across his chest. "Go!" he shouted, and we ran. When we reached the circle, Rachel grabbed the stones and started carving the final symbols. Her hands were shaking, but she moved with purpose, her eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight. Jenny was crouched beside her, sobbing quietly. "It's not going to work. It's too strong." Rachel didn't look up. "It has to work. If it doesn't, no one will ever leave this forest again." The hollow one slammed against the barrier one last time, and it shattered. The invisible wall around us cracked with a sound like breaking glass, and the creature lunged forward, its glowing eyes blazing. "Rachel!" I screamed. She thrust the glowing stone into the center of the circle and shouted something in a language I didn't recognize. The carvings around us flared with blinding light, and the hollow one shrieked in pain, recoiling violently. "Hold it off!" Rachel screamed. "Just for a minute." Evan, Jenny, and I grabbed whatever we could, torches, spears, rocks, and formed a wall between Rachel and the creature. The hollow one darted forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, slashing with claws like knives. Evan thrust his spear into its chest, but the weapon passed through its body like smoke. The creature hissed, its face twisting in fury, and it lashed out at him, sending him sprawling again. I swung my torch with everything I had, and the flames actually caught its face. It screeched and staggered back, but only for a second. It was too fast, too strong. Rachel's voice rose in a chant, faster and louder, and the glowing stone pulsed like a heartbeat. The carvings on the ground flared brighter and brighter, the light searing my eyes. The hollow one let out a piercing scream and lunged at Rachel, but it slammed into an invisible wall. This one wasn't flickering or weak, it was solid, glowing like molten steel. "Now!" Rachel screamed. "Get back!" We dove away from the circle just as the light erupted outward in a shockwave. The hollow one was caught in it, its body twisting and writhing, its glowing eyes wide with rage. It let out one final, bone-rattling scream before the light consumed it entirely. And then, silence. I blinked spots out of my eyes. The forest was still. The glowing stone lay cracked in the dirt, its light fading slowly. The carvings on the ground were burned into the earth, smoking faintly. Rachel collapsed, gasping for breath. Evan crawled over to her, clutching his bleeding chest. Jenny was sobbing again, but this time it sounded like relief. "Is it dead?" I whispered. Rachel shook her head weakly. "No, not dead. Bound. Like it was before." She looked up at me, her face pale and exhausted. "But this prison won't last forever. Someone will have to watch it. Keep the circle strong." Her words sent a chill through me. "You mean someone has to stay here?" Rachel nodded slowly. "If it breaks free again." No one said anything for a long time. The forest was quiet, but it didn't feel safe. Not really. It felt contained. Like the hollow one was still out there, watching us from behind an invisible wall. "We can come back," Evan said finally, his voice hoarse. "We can tell someone." Get help." Rachel shook her head. "No one will believe us. And even if they did, this place doesn't want outsiders. It's been here a long time. Longer than people. Longer than everything." Jenny stood shakily, wiping her face. "Then what do we do?" Rachel looked back at the glowing circle, her expression grim. "We survive. We leave. And we never come back." We made our way out of the forest as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. None of us spoke. We just followed the faint trail back to where we'd left our car, every step feeling like a blessing. When we finally broke free of the tree line, I turned back. The forest loomed behind us, dark and silent. Somewhere deep inside, the Hollow One waited. Bound, but not gone. Rachel met my gaze, her eyes haunted. "Places like this don't let go of you," she said softly. "One day, it'll find us again." I didn't answer. I just got in the car and drove, praying we'd never hear it scream again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching us leave. And it was smiling.